So, Shaun, who's on parade today then?
Our friend in Montana, US Army veteran Stephen Wolford.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I'm just wondering, before we kick off, my friend, where's your bagel and coffee? Very American.
I'm not very American because I'm gluten-free, so I don't eat bagels, but I have my coffee.
Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, please, Stephen? I know when you left the military, like most of us, I was the same. It was a difficult transition. What happened, brother?
In 91, after the first Gulf War, I had been trained in everything except desert. So they sent me back to training in the desert. In a very short span, I had 2 soldiers commit suicide. I was an officer at this point, and I had one of my friends killed in training right in front of me. I lost it. Luckily, I had some NCOs, non-commissioned officers, sergeants, that were Vietnam veterans, so they knew what was going on with me, helped cover for me while I technically went AWOL. Came here in Montana, where I am now, saw Shakespeare's Richard III, had what the Greeks refer to as a catharsis, but I certainly had never heard of it. I had all the transition issues that I hear in every room I work with the vets. I didn't think I deserved PTS. I didn't want to be diagnosed. I thought that was weakness.
The PTSD clinic, which both myself and Shaun have been to, the lead therapist was telling us that it probably takes 8 to 14 years for the full impact of PTSD to come through with veterans. So how are you finding with the guys come back from Afghan?
Having the Vietnam veterans has really helped with the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans coming in. They tend to be more tightened up because they're fresh out of the military, still locked in that wiring.
As a young soldier in 1983, when the IRA were bombing mainland Britain and Northern Ireland, I was in a barracks bomb. I was in basic training, and I remember that bomb going off at 3 o'clock in the morning. Once that bomb went off for me, somebody switched a switch on the back of my head, which meant, wait, you're ready. And I never switched off, Stephen, for the whole 12 years, mate, and the years that followed.
The research shows that from 16 to 26, we develop a whole new set of neurons. It seems that before 16, our wiring is who we'll be as a young person. And from 16 on, it's a new set of wiring to who we'll be as an adult. What we're doing is putting millions of men and women in combat zones and determining that that's going to be their neural framework for the rest of their lives. That's where the terminology came from, of wired for war. But now we've expanded what we consider wired for war. My wife, for example, grew up in Illinois, a small town. She and her sister were the only 2 black kids in the entire town. When I see her experience PTS symptoms, they're the same as I'm seeing in the rooms with the military veterans, combat or non. Her earliest memory is being hit in the head with a rock and called the N-word. And she grew up with this, being chased and beaten because of the color of her skin. So she has that same war wiring.
We talk about theatre of war. What about acting theatre? I mean, William Shakespeare. I don't know what your first experience was like, Stephen, when you first picked up that book. I thought, what am I doing with this? I can't even read it. To the transition later. Why William Shakespeare?
It's important to understand what trauma robs from us, to understand why Shakespeare works so well to replace what's been robbed from us. Shakespeare wrote in iambic pentameter, iambic being in our natural human heartbeat, but it ties into military training, the military manual on how to fire a weapon. So the military manual, at least for the US, it's you're in your natural breathing cycle of in and out. There's a natural suspensive or a pause at the top and end of each breath, just like Shakespeare. So breathing in and out, find a target, hold your breath, squeeze the trigger in between the heartbeats. It's that precise. Now, part of it is to calm the central nervous system down enough to be able to fire more accurately. But the other part, in my opinion, is giving us something to focus on, which is our breath, so that we're not focused on what we're doing. We're not focused on the fact that we're taking another life. The vast majority of people struggle to take a human life, even in the military, even in self-defense situations. They're not cowards. They're connected to their humanity. So we go back to Shakespeare. We're working with the vets. We're forcing them to breathe in before each new line of verse, honor the rhythm, and then have a suspensive. For example, to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, giving them the rhythm of Shakespeare, but it's forcing us to stay in regulation, keeping us from going back to the trauma fully. It's keeping us from leaving our bodies, which is what happens in trauma. Also, our fight or flight turns on. Our breath is affected, our heart rate. These language centers will go offline when we're in crisis. But because we're speaking Shakespeare, he gives us the language to express what we're talking about, where we normally might lack that language or lack access to it. That's the basic foundation of how Shakespeare actually helps us heal trauma, helps us wire around the trauma.
To hear it that way, Stephanie, it's given me a completely different way of thinking about it now. And I've seen the benefit of guys who've worked with the script. We were very fortunate. We did a show called Shakespeare and Remembrance. Is it 2 years back, Taff, was it?
100 years since Armistice. In London, they were ringing all the bells to commemorate the 100 years since the signing of the Armistice. And at that same point, we were on the stage at Shakespeare's Globe Theatre performing a piece with veterans only, just how veterans appreciate Shakespeare.
We wrote from our heart. We brought real military experiences that we've gone through, and we merged that seamlessly with different texts of Shakespeare. It was a gamble. We didn't think it'd work, and there was no patronising audience at the end. They were fully on their feet, wanting more. Yeah. So there is a journey with Shakespeare's Globe and Veterans and the Royal Shakespeare Company, mate, because it's working.
I was a big skeptic about Shakespeare. Shaun said, right, Taff, we're going to down Shakespeare's Globe. You're going on stage, you're doing Shakespeare. Shakespeare. It'd be a load of people like you with long hair pretending they're kind of... And so I went down there and the director said, yeah, Neil, what do you know about Shakespeare? I said, absolutely all, mate. I know nothing about Shakespeare. So he said, here's a speech by Titus Andronicus. I want you to take that home. I want you to write your thing around that. I tried to banish the tears of remembrance. That's in Titus Andronicus' speech. Yeah. And immediately I thought, I have spent all my life trying to forget about the guys who died around me. And literally, instead of breaking down and crying or reaching for drugs as I used to do, I reached for the pen and I wrote and I got it out my system.
Beautiful. Beautiful. But the difference with Shakespeare here is he's writing to our unique experiences. He was surrounded by veterans, and the same people were fighting then as now. The working class are going out fighting and coming back. You have Lady Percy's speech in Henry IV, Part 1, who describes post-traumatic stress disorder better than any other description in the English language when she asks her husband a series of questions. Oh, my good Lord, why are you thus alone? She's describing everything that he's going through, the withdrawal, the melancholy, the cursing, the blanching, the hypervigilance, the startling it sounds, all the way to the numbness of either Macbeth or Titus, where they've shut it off. That's what Titus describes so perfectly. It's what Macbeth describes when he says, I've almost forgot the taste of fears, time have been. So he describes how he used to have all these feelings, and now he's got nothing. There's coping mechanisms. I'm a recovering alcoholic. We don't care what you did to survive. Congratulations. Somehow, against all statistics, you made it. So for you, down the road, what was the greater effect of that?
Shaun will tell you, my knees were knocking like hell on that stage and I was shaking like a leaf and I was the last on. And I'd written the whole piece around being in combat and being cut off. And it's a true story where I'm alone with Jimmy Clark in a tower, chasing bullets all around, and bullets are flying around, and I hear him groaning. And I turn around because I think I've got to get the medic kit out for him. And he's wanking, he's jerking off. He's wanking under fire. I say to the audience, and that was the most traumatic thing I'd ever seen. It probably gave me PTSD, watching him having a wank while we were being shot at. He was trying to get in touch with his humanity, and he was only 18 years old.
Yes, yes.
I said, what the hell are you doing? And he said, I'm not going out without having a wank.
Wow. Wow. And only we would laugh at that, right? Because we get it.